Good morning. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. I appreciate the shout out. Good morning, everybody. I will call the meeting, the Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means Committee to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Baucus. Assemblywoman Brown-May. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gorlow. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblyman Watts. Assemblyman Yeager. Senator Canizaro. Senator Goycochea. Senator Harris. Senator Neal. Senator Wynn. Senator Severs-Gansert. Senator Titus. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Chair Dondero Loop.
Thank you so much, and please mark any members not here present as they arrive. Before we begin today's budget hearing, just a reminder to limit disruptions. Please silence those cell phones. For those presenting today, of course, you all know to please say and spell your name each time that you begin to speak. And please leave a business card with our committee secretary, as it helps them immensely. And lastly, we'll have public comment at the end of the hearing. We have two agencies on the agenda for a budget hearing today. First, we will hear from the Office of New Americans, Budget Account 1007, and they will be presenting from Las Vegas. And so Director Sharina, and I'm hoping I'm saying that right, Sharina de Assis will be presenting their budget request. Please come to the witness table, and I see you there, and correct my pronunciation if you wish. And go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks so much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, committee. I'm Sharina Diaz, and I have the honor to serve as Executive Director for the Governor's Office for New Americans, or ONA, since 2020. Thank you for the opportunity to present to this committee for our 2023-25 biennium budget and tell you a little bit about what we've done in the last 2 years. So with me today is Vincent Nava. He serves as the Senior Advisor for the office, and he will be presenting some parts of the presentation with me. Gracia Perez Rodriguez is here too on my left, and they serve as the Skilled Immigrant Integration Program Officer who works on our workforce development. We also have Mr. I think Daniel Marlowe. I hope Daniel's there, up in there in Carson City, who is the administrator for the Administrative Services Division, or ASD, who is here to keep a watchful eye on me when it comes to discussing the numbers portions of the budget. We also have Joanna Bryan, who is our wonderful budget analyst in the room. They're in Carson. Both Daniel and Joanna are amazing to work with and assist the office with anything budget related to make sure we only spend what is appropriated for ONA. Next slide. So ONA was created in 2019 by SB 538 and has been codified under NRS 223.900 to NRS 223.930. We just turned 3 last October 2022 and looking forward to inviting everyone to celebrate our 4th birthday this year. Our mission is and always will be to promote the inclusion and integration of immigrants, refugees, and aspiring Americans into the civic and economic fabric in Nevada. Our vision is to foster a more welcoming Nevada where everyone, including new Americans, can thrive and prosper. Next slide. We're a small team. In fact, if I were a betting woman, and it is March Madness, I'd wager to say that we might be one of the smallest staff agencies in state government. Currently, we are generally funded for 3 positions. Myself, the senior advisor, classified as a management analyst 2 and an admin assistant 2 as well. Gracia, who is our Skilled Immigrant Integration Program Officer, is a grant-funded position. This grant will sunset in June, and I'm always proud to say that my staff and myself included are immigrants or children of immigrants. I've often alluded that our work here at ONA is not only very much professional, but very much personal as well. Next slide. So we serve about 20% of Nevada's population. That is 1 out of every 5 Nevadan is an immigrant or a refugee. It is also important to note that 1 out of 6 Nevadan child has a parent or both parents that is an immigrant or a refugee. Our immigrant and refugee demographic has changed a little bit since we presented in front of this committee 2 years ago. About 36.7% of ONA's constituency comes from Mexico, 16.5% from the Philippines, 4.4% from El Salvador, and 3.8% from Cuba, 3.2% from China. We have seen an increase in the Filipino and Cuban population in the last couple of years. The rest of the 13.4% we have labeled other. This is only because it will be impossible to list all the countries our immigrant and refugee populations come from. But rest assured, we always ensure we are being as inclusive as possible. We do work with community-based organizations from the African diaspora, the Caribbean nations, and other Asian and Latin American countries. Next slide. Given that we are a fairly new and fairly small office with a very big statewide mandate, we do have a list of targeted issues that we focus on that we believe will give the maximum positive impact to our immigrant and refugee population. In the last 2 years, we worked on things you see on the deck: constituent services, workforce development, language access, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, refugee resettlement, and healthcare access. The photo on this slide was taken during one of our New American Voices session, one of my favorite initiatives coming out of our office, which we will discuss later in the presentation. Vincent and I will go briefly through one by one to really highlight that what ONA has done and will continue to do. Next slide, please. So here at ONA, we truly, truly believe the value of having a robust constituent service. And as you can see, we are truly making inroads of letting the community we serve know that we are here to help them navigate the intricacies of state government, connect them with information and resources, and listen to their issues and concerns. In the last 2 fiscal years, the number of cases we have closed has increased. Last fiscal year, we closed about 115 cases. Presently, and we're not even close to the end of the fiscal year, we already exceeded that number. The number of the screen says 116 cases to present, as it was some weeks ago when we worked on this presentation, but we ran the numbers yesterday, and presently we have 139 cases that we have closed. We also go to community events, as we always want to meet our constituents where they are at. Some events we might have even bumped into members of this committee. We try to go to as many events as we can, no matter how small or how large they are, but we believe it's a great way to be proactive. The photo on this slide, for example, is a tabling event that Vincent and I attended for a back-to-school event at Helen Cannon Junior High School. We are trying out this new thing here at ONA that instead of waiting for our constituents to come to us, we actually go to them. Next slide. We are also working on workforce development and currently focusing on skilled immigrants through our Skilled Immigrants Integration Program, or SIP. Skilled immigrants are those immigrants who come to our state who are already educated in their home countries and already have the professional experience, yet find a hard time translating those experiences here. So we have engineers, driving ride shares. We have doctors working in a fast food industry. And those professions are not bad. Let me get that straight. Don't get me wrong. But it makes more sense that we should try to utilize these skills that our immigrants and refugees already have and create opportunities for them to work in their chosen industries. Through a private grant by one of our national partners, World Education Services, and their Global Talent Bridge, we added a program officer that is Gracia on my left to focus on building pipelines for skilled immigrants. Through our work, we are set to launch a couple of cohorts this year, one in the north and one in the south, that leverage our skilled immigrants and put them in a workforce pathway that will be able to utilize their international education and put them in their professional skills. Of course, I would be remiss to not include that this would not be possible without the help of our immigrant workforce development groups. We have formed also one in the south and one in the north that comprises of a lot of our workforce development partners, our state agencies, and our community-based organizations. There are about 21 partners between these two immigrant workforce development groups, and it's just amazing to see how collaboration can really uplift ONA's Skilled Immigrants Integration Initiative. You can see some of our partners in the photo on the deck. It was at a grand opening of one of our employers that we work with, Spectre & Co. in North Las Vegas. Next slide. Last year, we also launched the Nevada Initiative for Language Access, or NELA. I really like acronyms, guys, so that's why I'm saying a lot, to implement the language access provisions of SB 318, which we passed last session. SB 318 mandated all state agencies to develop and revise a language access plan every biennium. While ONA was not named in the bill, almost 49% of our constituency are limited English proficient, so we believe that language access is extremely important to our constituency. We believe that the more Nevadans who can access state government, its resources, our services, our programs, the better we all are. So we took it upon ourselves to really be at the forefront of this language access work. In order to actually work on this initiative, we applied and received a grant for this project, and thus we were able to partner with Northern Nevada International Center, NNIC, and the National Center for Interpretation to do this work. Through this initiative, we assisted our state agencies to create robust language access plans that comply with the provisions as SB 318. We also complemented this work by providing a series of trainings to our state agencies. Not only that, we gave them a language access toolkit and a language access template, and to really hammer into them why it's extremely important to make state government as accessible as possible. 27 language access plans later, and these are all accessible to view through our website. We are still a resource for our agencies when it comes to language access, and we hope to continue working with them on this initiative. Additionally, we have formed an informal cross-sector language access group to further language access at different levels of government and even our nonprofit sector. So in this photo on the slide it was taken at the United Way of Southern Nevada's office at our first ever cross-sector language access meeting. So now I'll turn it over to Vincent to talk about the rest of our targeted issues.
Thank you, Sharina. For the record, my name is Vincent Nava, V-I-N-C-E-N-T, and A-V-A, Senior Advisor for the Governor's Office for New Americans, and thank you to each one of you here today. Some of the areas of focus we have tackled in the last few years include equity, diversity, and inclusion. In collaboration with the Nevada Office for Minority Health and Equity and the Nevada Commission of Minority Affairs, we led the implementation of Senate Bill 222. Senate Bill 222 mandates, to the extent practicable, for each executive agency that interacts with or offers programs and services affecting minority groups to have a diversity and inclusion liaison. The implementation of this bill as well included a statewide survey to assess the landscape analysis of how accessible state agencies are to our minority populations. It also included 3 statewide meetings, one of which involved some of our state's minority service organizations and culminated with our statewide 2022 Diversity and Inclusion Liaison Report. Second, connecting with the rural communities. Through private grants, we took it upon ourselves to connect with the rural communities by hitting the road on a statewide road trip to meet with state agencies, local municipalities, and constituents for Mesquite, Ely, West Wendover, Elko, Winnemucca, Fallon, and Reno. Pictured here is the very friendly employee and B team from Ely, Nevada, which we had the pleasure to meet and connect on our ongoing workforce development projects. Throughout this trip, we traveled with the intention of hearing about the issues and challenges affecting our immigrant and refugee communities, reassuring them that we were here to provide assistance, and informing them about our language access and workforce development initiatives that are taking place. Next slide, please. Additionally, 2 other areas of focus for us include connecting with our community. Last summer, we launched the New American Voices Initiative, which is an ongoing effort to provide a voice and a seat at the table for our newcomer communities by hosting discussions addressing the needs of Nevada's immigrant and refugee families. We have hosted discussions centered on leadership, education, and pictured here a conversation with Northern Nevada farm workers in Fallon. We aim to continue these discussions as we listen as much as possible from our state's diverse and impacted communities. Lastly, the Office for New Americans is not alone. We are proud to be part of a national network of 17 Office for New Americans offices throughout the United States, all created within different levels of government, but nevertheless equally centered on advocating and providing recommendations to the respective state on best practices and policies that will benefit their state's immigrant and refugee families. Last year, through a private grant, we participated in the inaugural Office for New Americans State Network convening in Washington, D.C., joining other Offices for New Americans from across the United States to discuss workforce development efforts and highlight challenges faced by our immigrant and refugee families as we advocated for their needs. Pictured here is a roundtable discussion. We were able to shed light on the ongoing initiatives taking place in Nevada to the rest of the Office for New American colleagues throughout the United States. Next slide, please. Since our inception, one of our mandates has been to coordinate with our state's refugee resettlement agencies, and we are proud to say we have done just that. Pictured here, you see figures of the refugee resettlement agencies helped resettle into Nevada. To reiterate, our state's 3 refugee resettlement agencies, ECDC African Community Center, Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada, and the Northern Nevada International Center, are the ones that provided the direct wraparound services to our state's arriving refugee families. Services such as housing, financial assistance, healthcare access, employment, and access to legal representation. In the past several years, there have been many changes taking place that have impacted and created numerous federal initiatives stemming from global humanitarian crisis. Federal initiatives such as Uniting for Ukraine, the Afghan Placement Program, and the recent influx of Cuban entrants into our state. ONA helps in the coordination of these refugee resettlement agencies by providing aid when it's needed. For instance, during the evacuation of Afghanistan, Nevada, like many other states, saw a very rapid influx of Afghan newcomers, and we wanted to ensure these families had housing, and for that, we had to act, and we had to act quickly. Thanks to the support from Nevada State College, Clark County, and the state's Division of Housing, we were able to connect them to available housing Nevada State College had at their campus, as it was not being fully utilized during the height of the pandemic. Thus, we were able to ensure temporary housing, and these families had a roof over their heads as they transitioned to permanent housing and their new life in the United States. Additionally, pictured to the left, in collaboration with Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada, we have taken pride in having been able to open up the doors of the Grant Sawyer building by co-hosting 6 orientations for Cuban entrant newcomer families. Next slide, please. In partnership with the CDC Foundation, we had 2 additional staffers throughout 2021. Lily Davalos, our Health Equity Program Manager, and Augusta Massey, our Healthcare Policy Analyst, worked with us for a year, advancing many of our healthcare initiatives. Initiatives such as co-hosting the first ever Newcomer Health Forum in our state's history. This forum encouraged community input with the goal of seeking out collective measures for improving our state's current refugee healthcare continuum. Pictured here is one of our keynote speakers from this forum, Rachel Uwimana, a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, who speaks 12 languages and who shared her inspiring journey to the United States as a way to highlight why newcomer healthcare access is essential to the advancement of our immigrant and refugee families. The culmination of this work resulted in a collaborative report that is now available and that emphasizes the best practices and recommendations to advance health equity for Nevada's newcomer communities. Additionally, we developed a landscape analysis report of the current public healthcare systems in Nevada to better understand how we can serve our state's immigrant and refugee families. Pictured here is Augusta Massey with one of our constituent focus groups that provided her with valuable insight for this report. At this moment, I will turn it back to Sharina to talk about our enhancement unit. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Vincent. Sharina Diaz for the record. Now, probably the main reason why we're all here. In the governor's budget, we have Enhancement Unit 225. It's basically the restoration of our travel budget. Our travel budget got cut during the height of the pandemic, was not restored last legislative session, but we are requesting to restore it now. We do have a statewide mandate, so restoring our travel budget also means we will be able to connect more with our constituencies in northern and rural Nevada, which we really, really want to do. And maybe next time when we testify in front of this committee, we will be in front of you in Carson City. Next slide. That's the end of our budget presentation. The photo on the slide was taken at West Mondover City Hall, where we went out there for our rural tour, which was a very eye-opening day for us here in ONA. Thank you so much for your time, and we stand or sit ready for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was great to hear from you, and we do hope we see you soon, possibly. And with that, we will start out with, I believe, Senator Wynn. Am I right?
I think it was actually Assemblywoman Gorlow, but I am
Oh,
more
I'm
than
sorry.
happy to
You
ask
are
that question.
correct. You are correct. Assemblywoman Gorlow, I apologize. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. Yes, I had a quick question about the travel to DC. How was it decided that there would be 2 staff members that needed to travel to DC instead of just 1? And then I have a follow-up, if I may.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Sharina Diaz. For the record, we're a very small team, so it's generally funded. It's me and then Vincent, and we have an admin and Gracias grant funded for our workforce development. So Vincent and I work in tandem. So whatever I do, Vincent knows, and vice versa. So I think it was more of a value to really bring the senior advisor to these trips because we work with each other constantly. I can't do this alone, and a senior advisor going to these meetings will also add value to the recommendations and how the office, which way the office goes.
Thank you. May I have a follow-up?
Vincent Alva for, yes, Vincent Alva for the record. Sorry, is it all right if I add something to it too?
Absolutely,
And then
I'm sorry.
you mentioned the DC. Oh, sorry. Sorry, request to speak, Vincent Alva for the record.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, I just wanted to add on to Sharina mentioned too. For the DC trip too, it was actually all 3 of us too that were able to go. Myself, Gracia, and Sharina, and then we went through private grants and private sponsorship to that trip too. And Gracia focused on workforce development, and we all, as Sharina mentioned too, focused on the initiatives that are taking place here in ONA. Too. Sorry, I just want to clarify, but thank you.
Thank you, and I do have a follow-up. I was just kind of curious if this was going to be enough for both of you to go to Washington, D.C., because I was kind of doing the math in my head, and one of the trips was a 4-day and the other one was a 3-day. Assuming that you don't have to stay extra because of time zone and flight information, I'm like, that's 7 days at $200 a day if you're lucky. I'm hoping government rate and hotel. Plus, I'm trying to plan a trip, and that air flight is like $700 one way. So doing the math in my head, plus travel and food, I'm coming up with a little bit more than $5,300. So do you think that's going to be enough?
Sharina Diaz, for the record, that's what we estimated, which was based on our last travel in DC, which was grant funded. Then it would be like 2 trips, basically. But yeah, that's what we estimated during the budget build.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel Marlowe, Administrator for Admin Services, if I may. Just to add on to that, it's the nature of the budget process for travel. We project out, we pick flights either based on previous flights, or we use, picking 3-4 months out, usually when we book, and then the GSA rates. GSA rates generally do change, and sometimes we can get hotels within that or not. So it is an estimate. I agree that it might be a little bit low with that, and we'd be happy to take another look at that and see if there's any technical adjustment that could be made with that.
Thank you very much. You are correct. Flights have gone up just a bit. Thank you very much. And with that, is there any other questions? Assemblyman O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Talking about your trips to D.C., how many other states participated, and what was the size of their groups?
Sharina Diaz, for the record, we currently have 17 ONA member states, so I would gather to say it would be 17 member states. It depends on the structure of their ONA and where they're placed, but usually 2 or 3 people from their other ONAs go to these trips as well.
I appreciate that. And Chair, if I may follow up? I'm just concerned, you're taking 2/3 of your staff to DC, and what's not being done back here for your constituents during these time periods? And you're saying you're using grant funding. Could that grant fund be expended more on your mission than everybody going to DC?
Thank you so much for the question, Sharina Desis. For the record, I do understand that it is 2/3 of our staff, but we are a very small office. It's just me, Vincent, an admin assistant, and the grant-funded position for workforce development. And I do see sometimes it might seem that we are not doing that work, but going to DC, learning about best practices, what other states have done to further integration and inclusion of immigrants and refugees in their states, I think is a very value added to our office. And we take it back to Nevada so we can find out if those programs, those initiatives, or best practices can be put here so we be more efficient, even more efficient in our work when we go into our mission.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that additional information. I think that you gather a lot of really great information when you go to a conference and you learn from others in other states what they're doing, and so I appreciate your wanting to reach out and become more informed. Assemblywoman Kasama, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question was, I was looking at the presentation, and you talked about during the various fiscal years the number of cases that have been closed. And my question was, previous to this office being set up, was there a particular agency that was handling this before this office was set up, or was it split out amongst agencies, or how were we helping with these caseloads before?
Thank you so much for the question, Sharina Desis. For the record, I don't think I can speak for other agencies and how they do their constituent services, but how we do ours is that you go into the community and they know that our office exists. And sometimes our immigrant and refugee populations, they don't know how government works, or they're afraid of government, depends on where they're from. So I think our agency really puts this emphasis on constituent services. What we do, though, is to collaborate with other agencies. So let's say they have an issue with licensure, for example. So we do talk to the boards. If they have an issue with the DMV, we really collaborate closely with the DMV, et cetera, et cetera. But before this office was established, I'm not sure how other agencies have done it. I'm sure they have their constituent services as well that is as robust.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a question on the healthcare slide. How much do you guys integrate with the Office of Minority Health?
Sharina Desis, for the record, we work very closely with the Office for Minority Health and Equity. We had standing meetings biweekly, I would say, and we work on SB 2222 to further the accessibility for minority communities to state government. So I would say we work pretty well. Ms. Tina Dorch and I, who heads that program, we talk constantly.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will close this budget hearing for the Office of New Americans, and thank you so much for being here with us this morning and giving us that overview. We appreciate your time. The next agency up on the agenda for a budget hearing this morning is the Cannabis Compliance Board, Budget Account 4207. And I'll invite Tyler Klimas. Hope that I said that right. I'm trying to put on my teacher hat when I say names. Executive Director of the Cannabis Compliance Board, and your team to the table. And go ahead when you are ready.
Okay, great. I think we have it up. Great. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Klimas. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board. And up here with me today is Steve Gilbert, to my right, Chief of Administration and Licensing. To my left, David Staley, Chief of Investigations. And then to his left, Kara Cronkite, the Chief of Inspections and Audit Division. Also joining us is Deputy Director Michael Miles, our Administrative Services Officer Lisa Figueroa, her great team member Tiffany Day. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. To start, we're going to provide you with a brief overview of the Cannabis Compliance Board, our operations, what we're tasked with doing, and then get into the budget requests that we have for this biennium. We'll then be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have for us. So we'll move to our presentation and start with our first slide that's up there, I believe. And we start all of our presentations with this slide. This is the public policy that the legislature set forth in 2019 that ultimately guides our agency and all of our operations. We take this public policy very seriously, as it dictates exactly how we perform our duties, our regulatory decisions, and ultimately our core mission and purpose. The legislature at the time recognized that the continued growth and success of the cannabis industry is dependent upon public confidence and trust, two words that are also very important to the CCB. And that public confidence and trust can only be maintained by strict regulation of all persons, locations, practices, associations, and activities related to the operation of cannabis establishments. If this language is familiar, it is because it is taken almost verbatim from the same public policy that guides Nevada's gold standard gaming regulation and oversight. The CCB was legislatively designed to model the same regulatory oversight we have for gaming, but for the cannabis industry, and for the same reasons. So the next slide, you'll see our mission statement that reflects those same principles. The CCB and its responsibilities oversees Nevada's 760 medical and adult use operational licenses. We enforce statutes and regulations that guide the industry. We focus many of our efforts on what may be our most important responsibility, which is to protect the public health and safety of our many medical patients, adult use consumers, residents, communities, and visitors to our state. Our agency is managed by a 5-member part-time board, currently chaired by former Nevada Supreme Court Chief Justice Michael Douglas. We hold monthly board meetings where the board presides over disciplinary matters, licensing approvals, management service agreements, and new or revised regulations, among other things. The CCB prides itself on accountability and transparency, and through our public meetings, we encourage robust public participation and engagement. When fully staffed, our agency has 93 full-time employees, and we have 4 divisions within the agency: administration and licensing, inspections and audit, investigations, and enforcement. Also created alongside the CCB was the Cannabis Advisory Commission, which I chair in my position as executive director. This commission is made up of 12 members and is designed to model the Nevada Gaming Policy Committee. That is, the commission meets at the request of the CCB board, the governor, or the legislature to study cannabis-related issues and make recommendations to the compliance board. The most recent example of the CAC's work took place over the last 2 years as it studied the implementation and regulation of consumption lounges, which we'll discuss a little bit later. Agency growth. When the CCB came online and was first authorized in July of 2020, we had 50 full-time employees. Since then, our agency has continued to grow now, as I mentioned, into the 93 full-time staff currently authorized. Along the way, we've identified operational efficiencies and addressed many issues that plagued the previous oversight body, working to automate much of what we do, and through reconfiguration of resources and functions, work through all of the backlogs we inherited or that were created as a result of the transfer of oversight responsibilities. Some information on our 4 divisions. The CCB's Admin and Licensing Division maintains the database of over 760 operational licenses and their corresponding ownership records. This division reviews and processes yearly license renewals and collects all the related fees. The division also manages the CCB's Cannabis Agent Registration Card Program, which currently has over 17,000 active agent cards. So that includes all employees, contractors, volunteers, and most owners, officers, and board members of cannabis establishments. Our Admin and Licensing Division also works closely with the Department of Public Safety and the FBI to conduct and review background checks prior to permanent approval of an agent card. And finally, Admin and Licensing works in conjunction with the Department of Taxation to help collect unpaid taxes. CCB agents of the Inspections and Audit Division are in charge of inspecting all Nevada's cannabis licensees at least once a year, and in many cases more than that, to perform routine audits of inventory and detailed inspections of facilities. Inspection and audit agents also conduct pre-opening inspections, facility modification reviews, and spot checks, usually around major holidays and events. Inspection and audit agents ensure facilities and establishments remain in compliance with rules and regulations. They track all inventory from facilities through Metric, which is our seed-to-sale tracking system, and they also inspect Nevada's 10 testing laboratories to ensure laboratory standards are appropriate and the procedures are being followed. The CCB's Investigations Division is tasked with processing all transfers of interest. These are sales of licenses to new owners, or if a licensee sells a percentage of ownership to a new or existing owner. This process includes a complete vetting of all potential new licensees and affiliated owners, officers, and board members. It includes sit-down interviews with applicants and a full suite of background checks and financial analysis on potential new entrants into our industry. This process was modeled after how the Gaming Control Board vets potential licensees in the gaming industry. The CCB Investigations Division was developed from scratch when the CCB came online in 2020. This was not a function of the prior oversight body, and it's been largely successful in efforts to uncover hidden ownership within the industry. It's obviously very important that we as a state know exactly who is in our cannabis industry and to ensure that bad actors are kept out. The results of our investigations into transactions are presented to the board at a public meeting, and potential and current licensees must appear in front of the board to answer questions about the vetted transaction. Finally, the CCB's Small But Mighty Enforcement Division is made up of 8 post-certified enforcement officers. In addition to supporting complicated and/or contentious facility inspections, our enforcement agents investigate criminal complaints as well as participate in multi-agency law enforcement actions to address illicit market activity like illegal outdoor cultivation sites, issues with Delta 8 and other cannabinoid products, and illegal sales of cannabis. The CCB hosts quarterly law enforcement meetings where we invite all local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies in a closed-door meeting to discuss cannabis-related issues and share operational opportunities and challenges. And that's a quick overview of our 4 divisions. So the next slide, which is impossible to read, is the CCB organizational chart, where you can see the divisions broken out. As mentioned, the CCB has 93 full-time employees when fully staffed, and we currently have a vacancy rate of 13% as we sit here today, and I'm happy to provide a larger version of the organizational chart to any member of the committee if they wish. The next slide gives you a snapshot of the distribution of licenses, as well as other facts on license holders, agent cards, and the types of facilities that we regulate. So that's cultivation, production, laboratories, distribution, retail dispensaries, and now, or soon-to-be, consumption lounges. As I mentioned before, we have over 17,000 active agent registration card holders in the state. On the next slide, this provides a breakdown of those 17,000 plus agent cards. We also publish a demographic report on an annual basis that looks at the makeup and diversity of all of our agent card holders. That report, which we release and then we post online, it's currently on our website, but we are also happy to provide that to any member of the committee following this hearing. Here's some tax collection and sales data spanning the last 3 fiscal years. This is the first year since cannabis was legalized in Nevada for adult use that we've seen a decline in yearly sales, down about 4.5% fiscal year over fiscal year, and about 14.5% calendar year to calendar year. This trend is consistent with more mature cannabis marketplaces across the nation, and it is a result of a number of market dynamics. For one, we had been experiencing extreme year-over-year growth since 2018 when we legalized cannabis for adult use. This is something we see in all new markets when they first come online. So the numbers were always going to come and stabilize at some point and begin to provide us with at least a baseline. However, then we hit the pandemic, or the pandemic hit. So people were at home, people received stimulus money and had much more discretionary income. As a result, we saw almost a 50% increase in sales from fiscal year 20 to 21. So what we're seeing now is that the sales numbers are coming back to earth. The pandemic restrictions are ending, people are back at work, discretionary income is falling as inflation continues to affect the economy. And additionally, our licensees are competing with a robust illicit or illegal market, which is not subject to state regulation or testing standards and can easily undercut our legal operators. Now, again, what we're seeing here in Nevada is consistent with what our counterparts are seeing in other states. If anything, given our tourism economy, our prices have not fallen as much as some of the other states, at least so far. Moving on to the way our agency is funded, it's funded a little uniquely. We do not take any general fund money. Revenue comes from fees, fines, and wholesale tax collection. And after paying for operations and other transfers, the remainder is sent to the State Education Fund. As you can see, this past fiscal year, we generated just over $8 million in licensing fees, time and effort assessments, agent registration fees, and fines and civil penalties. There was also just over $63 million collected from the 15% wholesale tax. That wholesale tax money is then combined with our agency-generated revenue, and from there, we fund our operations. We send $5 million to local governments. We send $250,000 to the Health Division at DHHS, and then transfer the remaining balance to the State Education Fund. This fiscal year, it resulted in just under $59 million transferred to the SEF. That $59 million is not the only revenue stream from cannabis that flows to the Education Fund. There is also a 10% retail tax on cannabis sales at the retail level. That amount also goes into the State Education Fund in its entirety, but does not pass through the Cannabis Compliance Board. In the most recent fiscal year, the state collected over $89 million from that retail tax. So the $89 million from the retail tax plus the $59 million we sent resulted in a combined $147 million transferred to the Education Fund for fiscal year 22. And I would just note, the CCB does not handle tax collection on the wholesale or the retail side. That duty is the responsibility of the Department of Taxation. So here is a further breakdown of our revenue and expenditures for fiscal year 2022. So we'll move on to our budget requests. For this biennium, we only have a few, and I will detail them generally, and then our team is here and can help with any more detailed questions that you may have on these items. But the theme of most of these requests is simply to continue down the path of properly organizing this agency. As you know, the CCB is only in its third year of existence. Not only were we charged functionally to take over oversight of the cannabis industry, but we were also charged with building a new state agency. For us, that meant designing a place that we could attract good talent, but also build a pipeline within the agency to ensure that this is a place where you can spend a career, that there exists advancement opportunities, and that we can not only hire great team members, but keep them, which I know is top of mind for everybody. Last session, this committee and the legislature approved a number of new positions and reclassifications for us, and I have to tell you that really allowed us to put those right pieces in place and begin to further develop what we believe is the most efficient structure for this agency. And so in that vein, our first request here that you see is for 2 program inspectors and 1 Auditor 3 position. We've been working with the Division of Human Resource Management on these positions, and we anticipate if they are to be approved that a desk audit would follow, and we would request to reclassify these 2 inspector positions to provide an additional supervisory level within the division. And again, this is a common theme here. On the next slide, we are requesting 4 new positions within our investigations division. This not only provides expanded support for our new and evolving regulatory needs, but again, it provides a new level of supervisory responsibilities that we need within that division. The next budget request is for an IT professional 4. This is going to act as a senior application developer that will lead on internal enhancements to our multiple systems of record. We have Acela for case management. We have Metric for seed-to-sale tracking. We have our website that also provides quite a bit of opportunity. So this position will help lead and design and develop some of those enhancements outside of paying an hourly fee to another contractor. Next slide is, a few equipment replacement asks and some software purchases. Again, we're happy to talk through those. And then the final slide is a office relocation request, and I know there's been a lot of conversation about this. Happy to have that as well. Our lease is up in November here at our Carson City office, which we share with the Department of Taxation. I know you had a number of conversations with them when they came before your committee as well. So that's the end of the asks for the budget. You'll see in total, we're asking for 8 new positions in this biennium. But before I end, there was just a couple other things I wanted to talk about, some additional thoughts to consider, things that we're looking at for this new year. Sales are down, as I mentioned. Tax revenue is down. We've got federal inaction on cannabis-related matters, which continues to hamper both regulators and the industry. We have limited access to banking. It keeps this industry, or at least a percentage of the industry, all cash-based. Federal tax code continues to prohibit certain tax write-offs for our cannabis businesses, which increase overhead costs and puts an additional economic strain on these businesses. And then additionally, there remains this kind of constant threat or possibility that the feds act and they reschedule cannabis or they legalize cannabis at the federal level. We engage heavily with our other counterparts across the states. We have a Cannabis Regulators Association that we spend a lot of time engaging with federal partners. But if that was to happen, it's going to change the landscape here significantly. I think it is inevitable, but we just want to make sure that we have prepared enough, we have enough information, and then, of course, the federal government recognizes what state-based marketplaces have already done and try to disrupt that the least amount. And then finally, looking ahead, we'll start to see consumption lounges open likely towards the end of this year and into next year. Following passage of Assembly Bill 341 last session, our agency undertook an almost 12-month regulatory process to put forth regulations around consumption lounges. This included over 15 public meetings and a large amount of stakeholder input. A lot of input also from the Cannabis Advisory Commission and a lot of work that they did. We held the licensing round late last year and successfully awarded the state's first new cannabis licenses since 2018. We had 99 applicants and issued a total of 40 consumption lounge licenses, including 10 social equity licenses, the first of its kind in Nevada. Lastly, this year we'll also be commissioning a market study that will review and analyze our cannabis marketplace, including examining supply and demand, any need for new licenses of all license types, as well as analyze the breadth and scope of the illicit cannabis market in our state. We look forward to sharing those results with the legislature and the public once they are complete. And with that, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to provide this presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and we do have some questions, and I will start with Senator Nguyen.
Oh, I'm sure you're getting sick of hearing my voice, but I do have some questions, mostly about this illicit market. I think we can all agree it is a significant problem for this industry. In fact, I've heard conservative numbers that the lawful and legal and regulated market is competing on a very minimum with about 40% of a black market or gray market. And on the high ends, I've heard anywhere between 60 and 80%. So given that, how much of the CCB staff time is spent on investigating or initiating actions against unlicensed activity versus these licensees? I guess specifically, I know that you have, I believe you said you had 10 post officers, is that correct? Or post-certified officers. What percentage of their time is spent on these unlicensed activities? And do you have any kind of reporting on that distribution of time between the illegal and legal markets?
Senator, thank you for the question. Tyler Klimas, for the record, and just to underscore your initial statement, you're absolutely right. This is a huge issue, a very significant issue, and not one that's solely in Nevada. And I think when you talk about the functions of the CCB in addressing the illicit market, we go back to legalizing cannabis for adult use. In Nevada and every other state, there was this thought that if you legalize a marketplace, then it's just naturally going to stamp out the illegal marketplace, right? Why would you buy illicit market cannabis if you can just go to the store and buy legal cannabis marketplace? Everybody kind of thought that would happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen at all. I think Massachusetts did a study. They said maybe 75% of their sales are illicit market. So it's happening everywhere. And so when we designed this agency, or when this agency was designed through legislation, I'm not sure that was really top of mind. How do we create, or do we need to create a division within the CCB to address illicit market activities? We kind of thought they'd go away. We were given 4 post-certified enforcement officers. I believe they were designed really to help supplement the efforts in regulating the legal market. Through last legislative session and through the consumption lounge legislation, we did receive authorization for 4 more post officers. So in total, we have 8. We have 4 vacancies. If you've not seen, Director Tagliati yet, we obviously have a very difficult time recruiting enforcement officers in this state. I think there's help along the way for that. But regardless, that division, even fully staffed at 8, if they're expected to address the illicit market statewide, would be obviously very difficult. That being said, the percentage and the time that they spend is mostly on illicit market activities. So given that there's only 4 of them, we've expanded that footprint, or expanded our footprint by partnering with state and local law enforcement. And so they spend a lot of their time participating on multi-agency task force. The federal governments are part of those task force. They participate in joint task force, taking down some of the outdoor cultivation facilities that we've seen in rural Nevada. You remember one in Douglas County not too long ago. That was pretty significant. Our folks participated in that takedown. Delta 8 and the issues with the Delta 8 products in our smoke shops that are accessible to our kids seems to be a sweet spot for some of our post-enforcement officers. So they've begun to go out there and help address that. They work alongside local business licensing departments to ensure the Delta 8 products are out there. So, I mean, they spend the majority of their time doing that, but if I'm going to tell you that it's super impactful to, the illegal grows and residential homes all across the valley, no, the footprint is simply too small.
So it's fair to say that of those essentially 4 people that are employed, they're spending their time, but they're mostly working through these other agencies and the roles that like local law enforcement or the FBI or other people are doing. I see you nodding your head down there, so I'm assuming that's yes. And then I guess my question is, how much staff would you need in order to do this? You had talked about how maybe we didn't anticipate that opening up the legal market would flush out the illegal market. But if we have so much regulatory action around the legal market, it's going to inevitably allow a cheaper product that is untested and probably more dangerous to have on our streets flourish. So is there something that you would need from the legislative body in order to protect these legal licensees against the illegal market, and more importantly, to protect like Nevadans against God knows what's out there on this illegal market?
Sure, and those conversations are happening. I think we're going to continue to happen through this biennium around, enforcement. I mean, yes, a larger footprint obviously gives you more opportunity to get out there and address those. But I also want to recognize, the prosecution side of things in this equation, right? We're going to need to prosecute some of these illicit market operators, which isn't or hasn't historically happened as well for a number of different reasons. That's not a judgment or criticism. That's just simply where we're at and kind of what happened when we legalized cannabis and it's legal. So we don't really, how do we then address illicit market and illegal markets? So yes, enforcement. So boots on the ground enforcement, I think will be very important, but also, a clear directive on what we do when we find, and we're not talking about small-time dealers or anything like that. We're talking about illegal, large-scale operations, cartel-led operations. We have to follow through on those. And so, again, I think these conversations are I know they're going to continue, they're happening, but that has to be a component of those conversations, or we're just going to miss that last piece and it's not going to be very effective.
So you had talked about perhaps, I guess, I don't want to put words in your mouth, maybe the lack of criminal prosecution or prosecution. However, I know that we had passed legislation in this body last session that created some civil penalties and the ability to sue in a civil, pretty substantial, I think $50,000 per incident. And it's my understanding that no one has pursued any of those civil penalties against illegal operators. And I realize that you would need people to investigate a grow house or illegal operations, but I think some of the low-hanging fruit would be potentially weed maps or some of these application-based things where people are coming here as tourists and they're pulling up apps and they are getting a delivery and they might not know. So I know that law, I had an opportunity to look at it again, gives the opportunity to bring civil actions. Has the CCB considered or engaged in that? civil action to combat financially some of these companies that are facilitating this illegal market.
Senator, thanks for the follow-up. Tyler Klimas again for the record. And I just want to make clear, I'm not saying there may be a lack of criminal prosecution, but it's more of, I think, of a clear direction. It's not about pointing a finger that's saying there's a lack of something. It's just, it's not part of the equation, and I think there needs to be clear direction that it is and should be part of that equation. You're right, there was legislation. I think it allows for the local DAs, I believe, in that legislation. They can bring the civil action is part of it. And it hasn't been used, as I understand, either. I guess I can't comment to its effectiveness. I think it is a tool. Depending on who you're going after, it's hard to go chase down, an illegal operator, right, for a civil penalty of $50,000. Depending on who they are, they're gonna pay it. And I'm not discounting that as a tool. It is a tool, and it has not been used, so we can't say that it's not effective or it is effective. But I think there's probably more to the pie that we're going to need.
So I would just encourage, I think we have put some of those tools in the toolbox, and it isn't limited. It's my understanding it's not limited to just a civil or a local DA bringing those kind of civil infractions. I think they're allowed to, but I would encourage us to potentially use some of those tools in the toolbox to see if we can, maybe not go after, the guy who's growing some plants in his house, because I think those are more difficult to investigate. But, people are posting them on, I've heard, like Instagram and some of these other apps. This may be a way to start that conversation with some of those bigger players that are facilitating.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Assemblyman Watts and then to Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I had a question about this new Level 3 classification. When did the Division of Human Resource Management approve that Level 3 classification for the marijuana program inspector class? And then how will that assist your agency in setting up an organizational structure to carry out the program's operations?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Watts. Kara Cronkite for the record, K-A-R-A. CRONKHITE. I'm the Chief of the Inspection and Audit Division. Having layered levels of supervisors, it would really align with the structure of many other public health and safety focused regulatory agencies. The inspectors would have someone at that level 3 position that is more experienced. They could train the lower level inspectors. They could assist them with general questions and day-to-day activities. And then they would only have to go to the supervisor for more complex issues and approvals, things like that. This would really allow more time for the supervisors to do supervisor-level work, such as program development, developing policies and procedures, and it would also reduce the overtime that we're currently seeing with the supervisors. This also provides a more layered structure, which allows growth potential for the existing staff, which will hopefully help us to keep good employees on our staff.
Thank you. Follow up? Yes. Thank you. So has your agency already reclassified any existing program inspector 2s to 3s, or do you or do you plan to do so?
Kara Cronkite for the record. We have not yet done so. We just received approval of the new structure last month, and we do plan to reclassify a few of those positions. So if these 3 positions are approved, then we would take 3 current existing staff and promote them into the level 3 positions.
Thank you for that. And one last question I had, again, and I understand the importance of making sure that there's some room to have more experienced people and take some tasks off the plate of some of the supervisory level positions. I'm just curious, with the time and effort billing practices that have been put into place, do you project that this kind of expanding the structure and the vertical nature of this this program inspector positions, that this would have more people involved in in some of the inspections and result in additional time and effort billing towards licensees for various inspections or issues?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Watts. Kara Cronkite for the record. I would not anticipate the time and effort billing to increase for these positions because currently the supervisors are having to go out and accompany staff in the field and observe their inspections and audits. The level 3 senior level inspectors and auditors would kind of fill in for that role. So I would anticipate the same amount of time in the field. We don't bill for general questions or any investigation that's not substantiated. So those are the type of tasks that I would anticipate would just be more spread out rather than increased.
Thank you very much. And Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you guys again today. Appreciate you presenting. I'm going to echo the concerns of Senator Nguyen. I think that we need to definitely do more on the illicit illegal markets. And I know I've mentioned this in other committees when you guys have presented, and so it's nothing new. But I do want to reiterate that if you need direction, you've got both houses, both parties telling you utilize the tools, and if you need more tools, come talk to us. Can you go back to the slide that showed where the revenue is coming from, both in the penalties and the other fees that are being assessed? Because I do have some questions on that, and I apologize, I didn't write down the slide number. I believe so, and it's just really hard to see because it's really small. How much was being assessed in fines, penalties, et cetera?
Thanks for the question, Tyler Klimas for the record. So we had just under $1 million in civil penalties, if that was your question, Assemblyman.
Okay. And just clarifying, that goes directly to fund your operations, correct?
So yes, it goes into the same pot as time and effort assessments, licensing fees, and then wholesale tax revenue. They all go into the same pot, and then we fund our operations. We send $5 million to local governments. We send $250,000 to Health Division, and then the rest gets swept to the State Education Fund.
Okay. And then you said that we're not going after any of the illegal civil penalties or fines. Would that, if we started that process, would those funds then be the same way? They go into the same pot of money to help fund the operations?
If there was a scenario where we brought some kind of civil action to an unlicensed operator and they paid a civil penalty to the CCB, then yes, it would go into the same pot.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Pun intended. Okay. I would encourage you to utilize those tools. I think there's an incentive. I question whether or not there should be an incentive to find the legal industries and like that, but there definitely is an incentive to go after the illicit and illegal market. And as my senator said, we really should be doing that. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of clarifying questions and then a separate question, if that's okay. First of all, kind of in line with my colleague's question on fines and fees, can you provide us with your fine schedule? Like, what is it that people are expecting to see for things like security camera issues or hygiene issues? Can you send that to us? Like, whether you, like, I'm hoping it's a transparent fine schedule, but if you have that available.
Sure, Tyler Klimas for the record. Yes, so that's Regulation 4, NCCR Regulation 4. It lays out all of our penalties fall into 5 categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The violations that would fall into each category are all listed in regulation, and so I'm happy to provide that to you.
That would be great, and if you could quantify like how many fines you assessed on that during the last biennium, that would be helpful as well. And then I wanted to ask about the authority for that, and this is, I did not look back at what we did in 2019 and 2021 on the authority for fines and fees and setting that schedule. Can you talk a little bit about where that authority is? Is it just like a general authority to assess fines and fees, or do we give you specific rates that we were hoping would get set against these? I'm just curious where those dollar amounts came from.
Thank you for the question, Tyler Clemens, for the record. So you say fines and fees, two different things. So fines, yes, I mean, the board has general authority to set up fines for disciplinary action, but again, it's a public process through regulations, right? So if there's any change to those, it would go through a workshop, and that's part of the regulations that are listed in NCCR 4. And then I think you're also probably talking about time and effort assessment. And yes, we have our council, they do their review, and it is in the same general authority listed in statute that we use for time and effort assessment. And time and effort assessment has been assessed since 2014 under the medical days and Department of Health and Human Services.
Right, and I understand time and effort assessments. We do that in the private industry as well through invoicing for our time, right? But I'm not quite sure how it works through your agency and how you set those rates, like the cost rate for those hours spent, and if those are invoices that have those broken down to clients or not. So if you could send us maybe an example of what you send out to a client, a licensee, so we can see what they're receiving, that would be helpful as well.
Happy to do so. We'll also send you Regulation 6, which details time and effort and what we charge for with time and effort. And the rate of $111 an hour has been unchanged since the Department of Health and Human Services. I'll send you that information.
Okay, but in the private industry, we assess our overhead costs pretty regularly and adopt different schedules. So just maybe some food for thought on how to offset some of those costs. And then my last question, which doesn't have to do with your fines and fees, has to do with the anticipated operational benefits to the investigations division from adding the chief compliance and audit investigator and establishing the 6-to-1 supervisory ratio with the additional 3 positions in those compliance and audit investigator positions. So operational benefits, if you could describe.
Thank you for your question, Assemblywoman Peters. David Staley, Chief of the Investigations Division, for the record. Right now, we currently have a very, very shallow management structure in the Investigations Division. When we first requested our budget and our staffing, we were looking at a large overhead, and our focus at that time was simply getting through everything, so it was all hands on deck. So we were heavily we were high on agents and low on administrative management at a chief or deputy chief or supervisory type level. Our focus was getting this backlog done. We had numerous conversations with the Gaming Control Board, and they have found, first of all, our process is modeled after theirs. So we found there's a lot of commonalities between the way we do it based on the model of the Gaming Control Board. And through conversations with Gaming Control Board management, they found that a ratio of 6-to-1 worked very well for the type of tasks that the agents were doing and the type of management needed to do that. So we started looking at that, and it seemed to work for us as well. The operational efficiencies that we'll gain by enhancing that structure. So we've requested a chief investigator, which I compare to like a deputy chief right below me, and then we would ask for one additional investigator 3, which is essentially a hands-on supervisory type position. So currently, as the chief of investigations, yesterday I was working with individual agents on working on their reports. Often I sit in on interviews of applicants, and then I turn around and I prepare for a meeting such as this, or I'm meeting with legal counsel requesting guidance on how to handle various issues. By enhancing that structure and adding that one extra layer, I'll be able to, the position of chief will be able to focus more on kind of the umbrella operations of the agency and the division as well. And a lot of the same efficiencies that Chief Cronkite mentioned as they add those additional people will be felt in the investigations division as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I had significant concerns when you were mentioning that there's supervisors in the field with the field folks. That is a huge cost burden and inefficiency, and I'd love to see those efficiencies get straightened out, whether it's that your field technicians need a different authority or different training. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have two folks in the field doing the same task. So I don't know if this is directly a question. I just have concerns on that process, and maybe adding these two supervisory positions will help get that authority to the ground. But without that authority, I mean, even the field techs at this point are duplicative, right?
Kara Cronkite for the record. Just to clarify, we always send staff out in teams of 2. This saves a lot of time for the facility, so we're not in there as long. They can check the whole area much faster. It also gets a second set of eyes on the facility, and for safety reasons, they're always going out in pairs. What this would do, the restructuring would allow for the supervisor to focus more on supervisory level work and allow the field staff to go out on their own without that supervisor there with them. And the reason the supervisors currently are going out with field staff is just because of time. There's nobody else to go out there with them, and that would be the reason for that currently.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Senator Gocochea, then Senator Titus, and then Senator Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to get into the weeds here, or the weed, I guess, a little bit. Sorry. Tyler, with 760 licenses in place, I can understand you're not looking for any more, but as the industry has evolved, we're seeing a little movement, especially from some of the rural counties that were flat said, no, we don't want to participate. Now as the industry's moved forward, and so this is more on your administration and licensing side, and I can see where the investigators would help you in that process, but I'm also understanding you need some regulations put in place and some changes made for a new round of, say, even medical licensures that are requested out of some of these rural counties that didn't play up front in 19, but now they want to move forward and they see the benefits. So, and we're struggling to get them licensed. Now, I'm sure you're not looking for any more, but we need to get them in place. Care to respond to that?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Tyler Klimas for the record. And you're right. There were some jurisdictions, mostly rural, that decided not to get in at the very beginning. And we have a limited number of licenses, and we have certainly had a limited number of licensing rounds. And so we didn't. And then there's economic development concerns, and the board certainly understands those. We did, and we do have draft regulations out for a licensing round for medical establishments for those jurisdictions that did not apply at the very beginning. Those regulations are drafted. As you can imagine, there's strong opinions on many sides of that, but they will likely be up in an April workshop from the CCB. And so, depending on what pathway that takes, the board has put on the record, though, that they would like, given that they have that authority, that they would like to move forward with that. So I think there's some positive movements there.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the ability to ask some questions. I have a couple. First, a comment. You made a statement earlier that you felt that once it was licensed or legal, that we wouldn't have bad actors. I find that incredibly naive. I guess you've not heard of moonshine or anything like that. Just because it's legal doesn't mean folks won't see that it's cheaper to buy it off the streets when something's so regulated and taxed. So I'm still shocked at that statement that you didn't think there would be illegal things. My question is, how many labs are there in the state, and what's the turnaround on the testing of the product?
Massachusetts. Thank you, Senator, for the question. Tyler Clemens for the record. And I certainly understand your thoughts on the naivety of that statement. I was just simply saying, I think just nationwide, when we created these state-based marketplaces, that putting in more resources and a greater attention to ensuring that we stamp out in totality the illicit market in conjunction with standing up a regulated market was just not something that was talked about in Colorado, in Washington, in Oregon, in California, in Massachusetts, and certainly in Nevada. And now we're seeing the effects of not having those conversations, and now we're going to have to go backwards and break back into it. But I appreciate that and certainly understand where you're coming from. And I'll turn it over to Chief Cronkite to address the lab question.
Thank you for the question. Kara Cronkite for the record. There are currently 10 licensed laboratories in the state of Nevada. The turnaround time for lab testing is approximately 3 days. There are several tests where the plating itself, they have to incubate for at least 48 hours. And so that's really why the turnaround time takes about 3 days.
Okay, thank you for that. And another question, Madam Chair. So why can you pass regulations and do not have to go through the Commission to get finalization on your regulations?
Senator, thank you for the question. Tyler Clemens for the record. Well, to answer that, we kind of do. And this is, I believe, a system that's unique only to the Cannabis Compliance Board. Whereas Gaming Control Board does not have to go in front of the Legislative Commission. Legislature designed this agency, didn't want to quite go that far. And so what we do is if we pass or adopt a regulation, the Leg Commission has 15 days to indicate that they would like to review that regulation. This was exercised, I believe, after Christmas, so in December of last year. So they do, if the Leg Commission would like them. It's just not an automatic.
There's an opportunity to pull it in and ask questions, but you don't need final authorization to enforce or begin the regulations, correct?
The final authorization would be because nobody decided to pull and reviewed it.
And along that same line, then, why did you choose to mirror the Gaming Control Board operations? Is that something that you decided to do, or was I can't remember that? Did the statute direct you to mirror the Gaming Control Board?
That's correct. That was in 2019. That predates me, but yes, in 2019, those were the conversations, and the public policy that's in place in law that guides and dictates the CCB it mirrors the Gaming Control Board's public policy as well.
And just a final comment, I mirror and echo what my colleagues have asked questions about going after the bad actors versus going after the folks that are licensed and trying to do the right thing and spending more time taking care of an industry that has a lot of illegal, especially cartels in our state, that it's not, I wish it was just limited to the marijuana that they add. So would certainly encourage you to step up some of that investigation on the bad actors. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question.
Thank you very much, and we'll go to Senator Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you please explain how monitoring publicly traded cannabis licenses has impacted the workload of the Investigations Division?
Thank you, Senator Harris. David Staley for the record. As I mentioned previously with Assemblywoman Peters, we were faced with a very high backlog of transfer of interest applications that we had inherited from kind of the moratorium directed by Governor Sisolak after some issues that came up in the press. As a result, each of the investigators has been working on a large workload of transfer of interest applications, and we have, in our effort to model after gaming, the work and what we analyze in those reports has gotten more complicated as the agency has kind of developed a competency in that area of our work. What that required, though, was that the individual agents were focused just on that application. The cannabis industry has approximately 18 publicly traded companies that are involved in owning multiple licensees directly, and then there are some others that have investment through a secondary mechanism. But the publicly traded companies typically are involved in an international scale, so they're involved all over the country, they're involved in Canada, and they can be involved elsewhere as well. But because all these agents are focused directly on those applications, this agency was not able to have a clear view of what these licensees are doing on a global basis. So as we have worked through the backlog and as our agents have developed a competency, starting January 1, we instituted a monitoring function. Now, again, modeled after the Gaming Control Board and the work that they do with their publicly traded companies. That's where I came from prior to being with the CCB, and I created the compliance unit within the Gaming Control Board. So I have a pretty good understanding of that function. So our agents have started spending time every month where they look at all of the filings that the publicly traded companies make with both the Canadian exchange and with the stock exchange in the United States. They're looking at financials. Public companies are required to fill a whole bunch of different notifications to shareholders throughout the year. They monitor that. As you can imagine, a multi-state operator has a lot to say. They want to drum up the value of their business. They want to tell everybody what they're doing, where they're doing, whether they're opening up in Florida or Massachusetts or Nevada. So this gives our agency a better global understanding of what our licensees are doing both in this industry and potentially internationally. We saw results from that first review by identifying 5 potential hidden ownership issues with among these publicly traded companies in January, and we're working now with those companies to determine whether or not a transfer of interest application needs to be put in for those transfers of interest. But it's a step in the evolution of this agency's ability to provide regulatory oversight for the licensees in Nevada that are also operating in other jurisdictions.
And Madam Chair, I just have a couple of additional questions. Thank you so much. How would the new IT professional position ensure that the CCB complies with the federal and state requirements related to criminal history information systems?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Steve Gilbert for the record. So the IT Pro 4 would be on staff to ensure that our systems are safe and secure for the information that we do collect. We do collect a state background check and an FBI background check for every agent that wants to be registered in the state, as well as our enforcement divisions do investigations on activities. So this IT Pro 4 would assist the other developer to ensure that our Excella system and our metric system are safe and secure so that information that we do collect is not weak.
So we've heard oh, go ahead, please.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Chair, if I may.
Sorry, please go ahead.
David Staley for the record. Senator Harris, one of the other things that's very important is, if you can imagine, the investigations division and the audit inspection division, as well as our enforcement, we collect a tremendous amount of proprietary information and data from all of our licensees. And as an agency, we have a duty to protect the safety of all of that information, especially when we're dealing with publicly traded companies that have very strict rules about what information can be released to the public and what can't. So in order to ensure that we have an effective regulatory structure and really protect that proprietary information of our licensees, that also will be a big part of what this position will provide.
Thank you. We've heard a lot about the comparison and modeling of CCB after the Gaming Control Board. Does the Gaming Control Board have DAGs as their attorneys?
Tyler Clemmons for the record. Yes, they do.
And are these, or at least for the CCB, are these attorneys that are versed in regulation or more prosecution? What's their general background?
Tyler Climers for the record. Thank you for the question. So we have 4 senior deputy attorney generals. We have 3 right now out of the 4. We had just recently lost one. There's a mix. We've got some criminal experience on staff. We've got some regulatory experience on staff. I mean, these are employees of the Attorney General's office. So, and as far as cannabis experience, I mean, now that they've spent a number of months and in some cases a number of years with us, they have quite a bit of cannabis experience as well.
Okay, thank you. I would just encourage the commission to move more towards a regulatory structure as opposed to a prosecutorial one, because I think that lends sometimes colors some of the actions that are resulting in the complaints and things that you might be hearing. Regulating an industry is slightly different than policing a population, right? Or trying to, prosecute folks for violations of criminal statutes is a different approach than violating folks who you regulate, right? And I think that the lens by which things are looked at might make a big difference in the relationship between the regulatory board and the industry which it regulates. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will go to Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question unrelated to what we've just talked about, but I have to admit I don't know a lot about cannabis products. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us what Delta 8 is and what the concern is, and is it legal, is it regulated?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Dickman. Kara Cronkite for the record. Delta 8 is one of many synthetic cannabinoids that we have in the country, really. It's not a problem that is strictly related to Nevada. It's everywhere. Synthetic cannabinoids we actually prohibited last legislative session. They are man-made cannabis products. The concern with it really is that there's a few things. One, it's not limited to those that are 21 and older. It's available to any age group, and it does cause psychoactive effects. They do become high. There's been several reports of illness due to potential byproducts. So when you convert, what they do is they take CBD, which is a non-psychotropic cannabinoid, and they convert it into Delta 8 THC. And when they do that conversion, there's byproducts left over. And those are unknown. We don't know what they are. We don't know what to look for. There's no test we can run because we don't know what we're testing for. And with those unknown byproducts, you have unknown risks. So the health effects of Delta 8 THC and other synthetic cannabinoids are really unknown. There have been hospitalizations. There have been a lot of reports of illness. Children have lost their life due to accidental consumption of these products, and they are available to children. So in Nevada, what we did was we passed Senate Bill 49, I believe it was, which prohibited synthetic cannabinoids in the state unless approved by the CCB. So if there was a safe way developed and proposed to us, we would review it and then potentially approve it to make these products available. However, at this point, there have been no safe processes proposed to us at this time.
Okay, so you said you're finding this in stores here in Nevada?
Correct. Kara Cronkite for the record. We see this product in CBD shops, gas stations, things like that. So the post-certified officers are, whenever we get reports of this or if they find it on their own, they will seize the product and educate the owners or point of contact for that operation and make sure that they're aware that they shouldn't be selling these products and that it's illegal in the state of Nevada.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I got an email survey asking me if I approved of it, and I couldn't really respond because I didn't know. So thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Assemblyman O'Neill and then Assemblywoman Kasama, and then I have two last questions, and hopefully we can wrap it up. So, Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. As I recall, early in your testimony, you talked about how you collaborated with local law enforcement task force, the State Department of Investigations, on going after the bad actors, the illegal grows. In the last 2 years, can you tell me how many times, how many cases you've worked with local law and the prosecution rate of those?
Thank you for the question. Tyler Clemens for the record. I'd have to provide you that information outside of the committee. I don't have the statistics offhand. Like I mentioned, that outdoor grow that was in Douglas County. I think there was another outdoor grow that we participated on. I could get you the details and the outcomes of those after the committee hearing, if you'd like.
Chair, if possible, I would like to see that information.
Thank you. And anything that we have requested you send to us, would you please make sure that you send to the committee secretary so that we all receive that copy? Thank you very much. All right, we will go to Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. My question was regarding the labs, actually. You talked about the labs, and you said there's 10 licensed labs in the state of Nevada. Are they private or are they public?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Kasama. Kara Cronkite for the record. Those are private laboratories. They are independent from the other operations. So if you own a laboratory license, you cannot have a license for cultivation, production, or dispensary due to the potential conflict of interest. So they can't have any financial interest in each other. So the laboratories are independent from the other licenses, but they are privately owned.
And these labs are strictly for testing the cannabis products?
Kara Cronkite for the record. Yes, they are specifically for testing cannabis and cannabis products.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on slide 14 where you guys had the $5 million grant piece. And this is outside of the 3% that's established in statute for the local governments, correct?
Senator Tyler Clemens for the record. I believe that's the case. So you're talking about the 3%, they can go up to 3%?
They can
in
go
tax
up
price.
to 3% in a
This is
flat
separate.
fee, gross rev
That's right.
tax. Okay, but is there any consideration or conversation to at least try to identify and collect how much revenue that actually is? Because I'm wondering if that also, since we allowed lounges, the lounge revenue would also get rolled into that, correct? Into 3%? So that's the question. They don't report to you or to the Department of Taxation what that accrual is. And I'm wondering, if you guys have considered trying to find out, right, what it is in this conversation around, how much revenue is being generated there.
Thank you for the question. I feel like I hear former Assemblywoman Carlton's voice in my head on this conversation on the grants. We don't keep track of what the local governments, what the rates are and what they collect, but I have a feeling that the industry probably has all of that data, and they would be happy to provide that to you.
Yeah, because I'm super interested, only because we did ask during the interim, and a couple of responses, but there were some cities that specifically, even from a confidential fiscal perspective, decided that they would not respond to the legislature. And I think that is a problem. I think that is a disrespectful, number one, because we gave them that authority and power to even raise that 3%. And so anyway, I'll talk to you guys offline because I have a problem with that. But I have a second question around the forensic labs, and I believe Senator Titus was kind of asking this question. But yesterday we heard in the CIP budget from Department of Administration about them wanting to create a forensic lab that then would bring in, or I guess create I don't know if it was a singular lab that would then ultimately seek cannabis fees to pay for it. And so I wanted to get an understanding on that conversation that may be going on, because what they didn't indicate is how much that fee would be, what is that potential future agreement of collecting fees for this forensic lab.
Senator, thank you for the question. Tyler Klimas for the record. So, we've had conversations about having a state cannabis testing laboratory, we being the CCB, and the importance of that. If we've got, if we run into issues and we have to retest a product, let's say there's issues with a pesticide that's being used, there's issues with a product that's potentially been compromised, to retest it, our only option is to take it essentially to a competitor. So we'll utilize multiple competitors to try to keep it above board, right? But that's our only way to retest a product. Let's say we wanted to do random testing to ensure product quality. Again, we can only utilize one of our state licensed cannabis labs that all run a business and they try to make a profit. And so that's where those discussions happen. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what they talked about, but if we were to go in with a state forensic lab and have a part of that lab be a state cannabis testing lab, then yes, there's the opportunity to charge for certain fees as part of that, as we do with other functions of the industry. But those are, well, if you have any other questions on that, I'm happy to answer.
I don't. I was just wondering, because we're carving out several things from the actual revenue itself, just trying to get an understanding of what that carve out would potentially look like, that fee diversion, because technically that's what would be going on, and where exactly it would be diverted from in your categories.
Thank you very much. And unless somebody else has a burning question, I will finish up with Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I had a couple of comments and just a couple questions, and hopefully they're not too challenging. But, first wanted to thank you, Director Klimas, and your team for the consumption lounge work that you did. There was a lot of work that went into making that bill happen. It happened quickly. As far as I could tell, it was a very smooth process. So thank you for getting that up and down, and obviously looking forward to having the first one open in the relatively near future. And then I did just want to comment, I had the pleasure back in the 2019 session of presenting Assembly Bill 533 with Bryn Gibson, who is Governor Sisolak's general counsel. That's the bill that created the Cannabis Compliance Board. And I think, as many have talked about, the thinking at the time was sort of a gaming control board light. It wasn't going to be a full thing. And maybe somewhat naively, we figured that once we created this board, the industry, got going, that we really wouldn't have to contend with the black market, that would sort of disappear. I think we're here today, and loud and clear, we realize we were wrong about that. And I think that's one of the reasons you didn't see a huge compliance part of the Cannabis Compliance Board, and an enforcement arm of that. But I will say I was a little disappointed to not see that in the budget request, to see the agency ask for the staff needed to try to go after the illicit market. I think you're right that there's some, I don't want to say turf war, but there's just some lack of prioritization about who's going to take this on, whether it's going to be local law enforcement, whether it's going to be state law enforcement, whether it's going to be the Cannabis Compliance Board. And so don't really have a question on that other than to say I think that the industry is generating enough revenue that I would like to see that be part of the Cannabis Compliance Board's mission. I think it's going to pay for itself with a couple of prosecutions. And so as we work through this process, just want to recognize that we didn't really give you the resources to do that. And I think we had a good reason for it. But I think we are now, with new information, at a point where we probably need to reassess that and make sure it's a priority. So no question there, just a comment. The couple of questions that I did have were on the budget. And the one was, I noticed you have civil penalties listed as a revenue item in the budget. Your budget probably is pretty unique because you actually generate a lot of revenue, much of which goes to education. And I'll say loud and clear, because I continually hear misinformation from the public about how the cannabis money doesn't go to education and it's going somewhere else. Once the agency is funded, once some of the local governments take their part of that, it does go to education. So let me say that loud and clear. But so my question on the revenue line item is just talk me through the thought of having that as a line item, because one of the concerns I would think is, well, you have a number there that you're trying to meet in terms of penalties. And so what is the agency's philosophy in terms of, ideally you have no fines being assessed, right? And right now we're really talking about the legal market, not the illegal market. So if you can just talk to me about what that looks like going through the budget cycle. And sorry for the long question.
No, Speaker, thank you, and I appreciate your comments and your questions. So, I mean, why is it a line item on the revenue? I can't tell you why it's there, but you'll also see when we project it out, we've historically projected it very, very low, because it's not a performance indicator for us, right? The more civil penalties we issue, that doesn't mean we're in good shape. That means we're out of compliance as an industry. That's not a good thing. So if that goes down or is non-existent, that means, congratulations, we have a fully compliant industry. So we try to keep the projections low. They are what they are. I mean, hopefully we see that number go down. And again, that doesn't, the way this budget is set up with the buckets of money and what's sent is civil penalties at zero doesn't affect our agency or our operations. So.
Thank you for that. And I mean, ideally, what I'd like to see is the initial, when we start going after the illegal market, to see a very large civil penalty number there that then hopefully would go down over time when we're able to crack down on that. But I appreciate the answer. And then, the other question is just on the market as a whole. Cannabis was really up during the pandemic. I think for maybe some obvious reasons, people didn't have much else going on during the pandemic. So I think we saw alcohol and cannabis revenue up. That has started to come down, and there's some significant concern about contraction in the industry. And I think in looking at some of the projections, looking forward, we think we're going to sell less, or we're going to make less revenue off of cannabis. So what does that look like in terms of your budget? If we were to drop 20% or so from where we think we're going to go, I think I know the answer to that given how your budget is structured, but would you feel the need to make that revenue up somewhere else, or are we talking about just less money that's going to be transferred out into education?
Thank you again for the question, Tyler Klimas. For the record, yes, the way the budget mechanisms are set up, that would just mean less final transfer money to the state education fund. But I agree with you. I think the cannabis market is on the doorstep of a correction nationwide, just because of its history and where it's come, and the acquisition and the consolidation and the debt out there. So we're going to see an interesting year or two in this industry, and that's globally.
Thank you. Chair, could I ask just one more, please?
Sure, go ahead.
And I guess just on that point, I want to reiterate that. I think that's why it's important to go after the illegal market, because there's no tax revenue associated with that, and it's not going to education. So every dollar we're able to capture into the legal market, it goes directly to fund our state education, our per pupil funding formula. So another important reason to do it. But the last question I have is something totally different, probably very easy, but wanted to ask about the Carson City office relocation. If for some reason you're not able to secure a new office by November 30th, 2023, is there a contingency plan that you have in place that you'll be able to ensure operation of the agency here in Carson City?
Thank you for the question, Tyler Klimas. For the record, we're working on that.
That was a non-answer to an answer. All right, with that, I think we have exhausted our questions today. Thank you, Director Klimas, to you and your team for answering those. I'm sure some of our committee members will be contacting you offline for additional questions, but please remember when you send in the information to send it to the committee secretary. So seeing no more questions, we'll close that budget, and we'll now move into public comment, which is the last item on our agenda today. So due to time considerations, each person in public comment will be given 2 minutes. Please remember to state and spell your name for the record, and then begin your statement. To call in, please dial 888-475-4499. When prompted for the meeting ID, please enter 834-8764 9138 and press pound. And when prompted for participant ID, please press pound. This is also on your agenda today if you're looking online. So I will begin with public comment here in Carson City. Is there anyone who would like to join us? And then I'll go to Las Vegas, and then I'll go to the phones. Okay, seeing none here in Carson City, I will go to Las Vegas, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, my name is Bill Hanlon, Hanlon. I want to talk about education. If you want to increase student knowledge, understanding, and comfort levels and achievement, you must support an increased funding for content-based professional development offered by the RPDPs. Content-based professional development is based upon the content teachers teach, how they teach it, resources that support that, and how to assess it. I'm hoping that you have handouts that were delivered to you, but if you look at one of the handouts I have, you can see the greatest difference between elementary and secondary education, particularly in the math area, is vocabulary and notation. So if you look at the first handout, when we're adding just numbers, you can see when we do that in algebra, we're doing the same things. In elementary education, we say add hundreds to hundreds, tens to tens, ones to ones. The difference with the same problem is in secondary math, we say combined like terms. If you look at the second page of the handout, I think most of you have, you see a multiplication problem of 32 times 21. And beside that, we have the same type of thing in algebra, which is 3x plus 2 times 2x plus 1. If you look at those, you can see those are done exactly the same. The point I want to make is, if we do not have high-quality teachers that know and understand the content that they're teaching and how to teach it, it makes learning for students a lot more difficult. And I'm asking you to look at the RPDP budgets, and since they were decreased by about half on the last recession in 2007, they need to be doubled and probably even tripled if, in fact, we want to make sure students have a fair chance of learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next person at the table, please.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Rico Ocampo, RICO-OCAMPO. I'm here on behalf of Make the Road Nevada in support of the Governor's Office for New Americans. I would also like to say I'm a constituent of Senate District 12 and Assembly District 41. Make the Road Nevada is an organization that has been working tirelessly to support the immigrant community in our state. Our organization was formed in 2017 in response to the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting, when many undocumented workers and now survivors face significant barriers in accessing medical and mental health services due to their immigration status. The partnership between Make the Road Nevada and the Governor's Office for New Americans has yielded significant results for the immigrant community in our state. A prime example of this is the recent launch of Nevada's first ever Immigrant Career Summit, which we partnered with ONA to organize. The event was a resounding success, serving over 60 immigrants in one day and providing them with invaluable information on how to start a business, how to navigate higher education, among other things. ONA led a workshop on how to access professional licenses due to the passage of AB 275 several years ago, providing in-depth information about the various types of professional licenses available to immigrants, a critical step towards enhancing their employment opportunities and helping immigrants integrate into the cultural life of Nevada. The impact of ONA on the immigrant community extends far beyond this recent event. ONA has provided vital resources like constituent services and language access support to aid state agencies in the creation of their language access plan. Without ONA support, many immigrants in our state will be left without a state agency to turn to, a state agency that understands their needs, and I think most importantly, a state agency that listens. We believe that ONA's continued efforts are essential in making a difference in the lives of immigrants in Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person, go ahead, please.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Elizabeth Velázquez y EILSABETBELASQUES. Soy organizadora comunitaria de Make the Road Nevada y apoyo a la oficina del gobernador para nuevos estadounidenses. He tenido la oportunidad de trabajar con la oficina de ONA. He referido a miembros de la comunidad a ONA y ellos los han apoyado. Puedo confirmar que la vida de las personas a las que he referido a ONA han cambiado favorablemente. La oficina es un espacio seguro para la comunidad inmigrante y es muy necesaria. Tengo mucha confianza en su personal y en los servicios que brinda. Les pido que apoyen a ONA y sus financiaciones. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Chair, could I provide translation for that?
Thank you very much. If you would like
Could we
to,
provide translation to that?
yes, quickly, please.
Yeah, it'll take less than a minute. She was saying, my name is Elizabeth Velasquez. I'm the community organizer with Make the Road Nevada, and I'm in support of the Governor's Office for New Americans. I've had the opportunity to work with the ONA office. I have referred community members to ONA, and they have supported them. I can confirm that the lives of the people I have referred to ONA have changed. Their office is a safe space for immigrant communities, and is much needed. I have a lot of confidence in their staff and the services they provide. And I'm asking you to support ONA and their funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing that for us. I appreciate that. Anybody else in Las Vegas for public comment? With that, we will go to the phone line, BPS, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to offer public comment today, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Deanna Hewitt-Tran. That's DEANNA-HUATRAN. And I am the Coalition Coordinator for the Nevada Immigrant Coalition here on behalf of the Coalition. The Nevada Immigrant Coalition consists of diverse organizations from across the state that work together to fight for immigration reform and immigrant justice. The Office of New Americans is an important agency for the state of Nevada and its immigrant and refugee communities. Established in 2019, ONA serves as a resource for immigrants and refugees seeking to integrate into the social, economic, and civic fabric of the state. Through its various programs, ONA has furthered language access, promoted economic justice through workforce development, and developed health equity in order to help our immigrant, refugee, and asylee communities navigate the challenges of living and working in a new country. ONA and its team work tirelessly to promote diversity and inclusion in the state, and has helped to build a stronger and more welcoming community for all our families and children. We are so grateful for the work that ONA does to ensure that the prosperity and welfare of our immigrant residents are long-lasting, and we hope that the committee continues to support this office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. BPS, next caller, please.
Good morning, members of both Committee, Senate Finance, and Assembly Ways and Means. My name is Raquel Cruz Juarez. I use she and ella pronouns for the record. I live in Senate District 12 and Assembly District 41. I'm enthusiastically joining this meeting in support of robust funding for the Office for New Americans, commonly known as ONA. 16 years ago, I migrated to this country with my family from Guatemala. When I think about the impact ONA has had and can continue to have, I think about my mom. Like myself, my mom was born in Guatemala, and as we transitioned to this country, she always approached her contributions to this community with respect, neighborly care, and hard work. I observed my mother navigate systems foreign to her with English as a second language, studying words she had never heard, and ultimately advocating for the needs of our small family. I reflect back on this experience and today can see how impactful the work of ONA has been. I can't help but to think what it would have been like to have Sharina supporting my mom in navigating a website, Vincent explaining resources, Zuli pointing her in the right direction, and Grecia translating and interpreting documents. Sharina, Vincent, Zuli, and Grecia, the names behind ONA, the names behind an agency that continues to serve our immigrant, refugee, and new American community like me. I work in healthcare and often support immigrants finding healthcare. ONA is one of the first places I direct them to. Their impact and reach goes beyond personal for me, but I sleep better at night knowing I can count on ONA to help navigate barriers for people accessing healthcare. Please support this effort to ensure our communities continue being served in the ways they deserve, with dignity, respect, and a heartfelt desire to contribute to our great state of Nevada. Gracias.
Thank you very much for your comments. BPS, do we have any more callers on the line?
Yes, Chair. One moment, please.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Melena DiMaggio. That's MALENA-DIMAGGIO, and I am the Immigration Program Manager with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. PLAN works with immigrant, refugee, and asylee communities through leadership development, grassroots organizing, and policy advocacy to build collective power together. PLAN is proud to have supported the bipartisan legislation that led to the creation of the Office of New Americans in 2019. ONA has served as an information clearinghouse, not only for constituents, but also for state agencies by providing immigrant communities with resources relating to language and healthcare access, as well as advancing entrepreneurship and workforce development through occupational licensing. ONA has helped to empower new and aspiring Americans and allow them to further contribute to our state's economic growth. The Office of New Americans has played and continues to play a critical role in empowering Nevada's immigrant and refugee communities, and we do hope that the committee will continue their support for such a vital office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
Good morning. My name is Milan Devetak, MILANDEVETAK, and I'm the director of the ECDC African Community Center. We are a local refugee resettlement agency, and we work very closely with the Governor's Office for New Americans. I would like to take this opportunity this morning to state that we appreciate the work and coordination with the Governor's Office of New Americans, especially the coordination that they have had with the direct services that we provide. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. BPS, do we have any more callers?
Thank you, Chair. There are no other callers on the line to offer public comment at this time.
Thank you so much, and thank you, committee members. This completes our business for today, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.